The title of the book is Where the Sidewalk Ends, fiction memoir. It takes place from the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and early 90s in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, Toronto, Montreal, and then a decade of living in New York City. The synopsis of the book is: I was a child born into a dysfunctional home with an alcoholic father and an unfit mother. No love to be found there. From foster care to juvenile detention center to street life, then a fashion model and an actress. I vowed at a very young age to find love, know what love is, and to be love. This is chapter 1. My early years, 8 years old. I could tell how drunk Stanley, biological father, was before he entered the house. The rumbling of the stones in the driveway alerted me he was coming. I listened to how slow or fast he drove into the driveway. The heavy thumping sound of his footsteps let me know if I needed to hide. My mother was the first to encounter him, and the fighting would always begin. My earliest memories of my childhood were sitting together with my 4 sisters as we hid in a dark closet with the door shut. I quivered with fear as I heard the sounds of screaming, furniture, and glass being smashed. The darkness of the closet heightened my imagination, thinking the door would swing open and all of us would get a beating. The youngest sister, 4 years old, huddled next to me, her small body jerking with each crashing sound. She moaned and cried as her urine spread across the floor. It was another night of my parents raging with anger at one another. It ended with them retreating to separate rooms. The silence was a signal that if we came out of hiding and stayed quiet, maybe none of us would be noticed by the drunk. Uncertainty of everything was the common thread that held my sisters and me together, all cowering in fear. As sisters, we went our own separate ways. Friends were our way to escape the constant battle zone. We had nothing in common with one another. I was 8 years old, only sharing a place to sleep. On Sunday, my mother cooked the one meal of the entire week. She removed the lid off the large pot and gave us permission to help ourselves. The older sisters pushed and elbowed one another, fighting to get the most, leaving small rations for the 3 youngest. I wanted no part of this and watched with indifference. I preferred to starve than be part of this desperate display that I deplored. Each sister retreated to their chosen spot in the house to quickly devour the food. During the week, we helped ourselves to poor man's food of white bread, peanut butter, and assortment of Campbell's soup. Neighbors became a way to get meals. It brought a smile to the lonely elderly couple to see me. Grace talked about whatever was on her mind that day. As she prepared delicious food, she knew what was our favorites. Edward sat in the rocking chair, always with a smile and a kind word. They fed me several times each week. I left with a full bag of cake and other delights. Also, a young, just married couple who lived just down the road was eager to share their food and let me play with their dog. Claire and Ron grew up in the city and they had plans to start a small farm. I helped in her small garden. I learned the secrets of how to grow food. Claire spoke of the best time of the year to plant and how much water was needed, what time of the day to water the plants. She gifted me with many different packages of seeds to start my own garden. I got inspired to create my 8 foot by 12 foot garden. I decided I could make money by selling a portion of the vegetables on the weekends by setting up a roadside stand off of the busy highway. It was fascinating planting the seeds and daily attending to the care, watching the seeds sprout into large plants, giving way to a perfect harvest, a cornucopia of many vegetables. My favorites were cucumbers from long trailing vines that produced many sizes, also carrots and beets. I planned the layout, gathering of straight, long, thick branches that held up the tomatoes and the peas, placing perfect wood wedges to support the squash and the pumpkins. The planting of the succulent sweet strawberries on 2 sides, several rows, completed the abundance of the splendid labor of love. I experienced a lot of pleasure from using my hands and working with the fertile soil. and did not mind after the cleanup of my body, taking a shower to wash away the salty sweat and the soil from my body. It was moments like this of being refreshed into a newfound self. I loved to dance and to play act. Music was my way of retreating into my world by expressing my feelings that lay dormant from within. Music made me want to get up and let go of all my tension. I danced in front of the television as I connected to the sounds of Soul Train. My sisters sometimes watched with curious looks on their faces. Each month, I collected as many albums as I could and to order from the Columbia Record mail offers. If the artist had a distinctive sounding voice, I bought all their albums. At certain times, I found myself alone with no one at home. The stereo record player thumped with the heavy bass. Music became my way to disappear into my emotions, to soften into a trance like state. I wrote several plays several times each month and cast myself in the lead role. Sometimes it would be a musical or a drama like a Greek tragedy. Seeking to get pocket money, I charged a fee of $1 to the neighborhood kids. I accepted money, pop or milk bottles, which I could return to the store and get from 5 to 25 cents. I put on summer and winter theater. The winter performances were done on ice skates or besides the frozen creek. The words flowed through me as if the handwriting was not mine, slanted to the left and perfectly formed. My normal writing was heavy-handed and most definitely vertical. Was I channeling the gifts of knowledge of ancient secrets? The roles in the plays were performed by my complaining, reluctant sisters and certain friends. I created a stage on a raised backyard deck, bedroom sheets hung on the rope, creating stage curtains which extended half the length of the deck. The back door of the house was the actor's entrance onto the stage. Rehearsal for the play was the same day before the neighborhood children would gather for the performance. During the play, several people from the audience would be called upon to join on the stage to be part of the play acting. Several times each week, my mother called and interrupted my solitude of daydreaming. We were gathered to go to a certain local bar to fetch Stanley, as we were told to call our biological father. We hitchhiked rides as it was 30 miles to the smog-filled city of Hamilton, located on the shores of Lake Ontario. My sister's mother and I all stood in the pack at the gas station waiting, asking for a ride to the city. Stanley had one drinking establishment. We stayed outside waiting as my mother got drunk. We huddled close by one another at the door as it swung open. A drunken man stumbled towards us. As he got closer, he spoke in a loud voice. "Where are your parents? Why are you alone out here so late?" Several other men joined in, crowding around us, pressing their faces close. The familiar, repugnant smell of alcohol filled my nostrils. My older sister, who was always in a foul mood, shouted, "Everyone back off." The faces retreated, mumbling a word or two. I voiced my concern that Stanley was not fit to drive the car. My mother's answer always would be, "We have no choice. Get in the car now." My sisters and I sat in the back seat in silence, listening to our mother, who spoke nonstop about how unhappy she was. "When are you going to stop drinking and be at home with us? Are you seeing another woman?" Her questions went unanswered as Stanley was not saying a word. "Stanley!" Suddenly, my mother yelled, "Stop the car, stop the car." She flung open the car door, jumped out, and opened the back door. Grabbing my hand, she pulled me out of the car. We entered a cornfield. She sat down, brought her knees to her chin with me between her legs. Her wailing and sobbing were nonstop as she held on to me. She moaned, "Why me? Why me? I cannot take any more." My throat tightened and I tried to speak words of comfort. I felt cold and numb, unable to utter a single word. And my mother's crying only intensified my sadness and confusion. My only refuge would be when I visit the homes of different playmates. I found moments to forget about my pitiful life. They would invite me to a dinner. I would see how different their home life was from mine. My friend's home was full of love. caring, and laughter, a perfect family that I long prayed for. I always dreaded leaving. The Dutch family who grew flowers was my favorite place to visit. Endless fields of red tulips and yellow gladiolos. They were neighbors who lived behind our property. Their farm was on the land that stretched for miles in every direction. It surrounded the entire area on both sides of the roadway. They lived in a grand, enormous house with 10 children who were cared for by their parents, grandparents, uncles, and aunts, all who lived together in perfect harmony. Sophia and her brother Peter were my age. They were twins. To my delight, after playing together and ended, they invited me to dinner. A long table made from the reddish color polished wood with white, soft blue dishes filled with hot food. I loved the various offerings of food that I had never tasted before. Small pancake puffs, fried codfish with assorted vegetables were grown on the farm. The conversations were about the day's events and plans for the next day. Laughter filled the room, and a dreamlike reverie of everyday, ordinary moments awoke my senses, feeling so satisfied as the gentle caring of others touched me. Each new season brought new possibilities. I figure skate on the winter months on the frozen creek a mile from where I live. Children of all ages who lived on the other side of the creek became my winter friends. The hills created a steep, smooth ride, perfect for sledding. At the bottom, we glided across the creek. At sunset, the boys created a bonfire. The many colors of the sky reflected onto the snow, casting a soft pink on the hillsides. In these moments, I felt calm without a care. In the summer months, were a time of no school, the nearby creek flowed, swimming and playing were mixed with lots of laughter. We gathered flowers to be woven into crowns to wear on our heads. The creek's muddy banks became our play wrestling areas. Several large deep pools of clear, warm water were perfect for swimming or just floating and staring into the deep blue sky. My mother's idea of Christmas was to go to a local Salvation Army store. She reminded us before we got out of the car that we could only pick one item each. Entering the store, my sisters hastily spread out in all directions. I headed to the art section. I found a small painting of a village in a valley surrounded by mountains covered in snow. The lady at the cash register yelled, "Lady, can you quiet your children and have them stop running around?" Upon checkout at the cash register, the cashier said, "You know, your children are not supposed to pick their own Christmas gifts." My mother was busy checking the prices on the sale tags as she spoke. I hope I have enough money. Last paragraph. As the months passed, my moods changed and I continued to experience the days of melancholy. I felt paralyzed. My waking hours seemed to drag on, leaving me feeling exhausted. Sleep often was impossible as my mind was filled with dark, unwanted dreams. Leaving my room after hours of crying, my anger and frustration lashed out. Stanley sat on his lounge chair in the living room with his ever-present bottle of beer on the side table. I came up behind him, took the bottle of beer, poured it over his head. I threw the bottle at the stone fireplace, smashing it into pieces. I moved to the front door and watched Stanley as he mumbled his obscenities and tried to stand up, falling several times back into his chair. He stumbled, veering from side to side, waiting to chase after me. As he got close, I yelled, "You are a worthless drunk." I left the door open as I ran from the house to my friend's home where I would stay for the next few days. I felt an overwhelming indifference and contempt for him and wanted only to be somewhere, but not here. I knew that his drinking contributed to the cause of all the emotional pain that we all endured. There was no love in this house because of him.